Tea with Tolkien, a podcast for the Hobbit at heart. Pull up a cozy chair and join us as we chat about the works and faith of J.R.R. Tolkien and strive to carry a little piece of Middle-earth into our own daily lives. I'm thrilled to be taking a break from our Silmarillion Book Club episodes to bring you a special bonus episode for Tolkien Reading Day, which is tomorrow if you're listening to this just as the episode is posted. Tolkien Reading Day is on March 25th. Since 2003, the Tolkien Society has celebrated March 25th as Tolkien Reading Day by encouraging fans around the world to celebrate Tolkien, share their favorite Tolkien passages, and to put on Tolkien-inspired events. They've created a theme for each year, and this year's theme is hope and courage, two things that we dearly need these days, so it is quite fitting. If you're celebrating this year, the Tolkien Society encourages you to share all about it on social media with the hashtag Tolkien Reading Day 2021. So what is the importance of March 25th? We could easily refer to March 25th as the most important date of all history, both in our world and in the history of Middle-earth. And that, if you might have guessed, is no coincidence. Tolkien created Middle-earth with painstaking detail and wove importance and symbolic meaning into every page of The Lord of the Rings, or nearly every page, and the date of important events are no exception. March 25th marks the date when the One Ring was destroyed in the fires of Mount Doom. So what is the significance? Why did he choose this date? It turns out that this date is incredibly important in Christian history, and Tolkien would have known this. In The Spirit of Liturgy, then Joseph Cardinal Ratzinger wrote, "Jewish tradition gave the date of March 25th to Abraham's sacrifice. This day was also regarded as the day of creation, the day when God's word decreed, 'Let there be light.' It is also considered very early on as the day of Christ's death and eventually as the day of his conception. This date is officially celebrated in the Catholic Church as the Feast of the Annunciation, which is the celebration of the Incarnation, Mary's fiat, when Mary assented to God's will and became the Mother of God." Considering its importance in Jewish and Christian tradition, it feels natural that Tolkien would have chosen March 25th to bear such significance to the history of Middle-earth as well. Now, in The Lord of the Rings, two major events took place on March 25th. First and foremost, this is the date on which the One Ring was destroyed, and later, this is also the date that Elenor the Fair was born, Samwise Gamgee's daughter. And so it is on this date that we encounter, in so many ways, Tolkien's devotion to Christ's humbled and sacrificial love. Mirroring Christian history, Tolkien presents his readers an incredible juxtaposition of life and death. We have Mary's acceptance of Christ's incarnation was a death to her own plans or desires for her life, and Christ's humiliation, torture, and crucifixion was the ultimate act of love which brought life through death. Now, through Frodo's ultimate death to himself, he was able to conquer the evils of Sauron and bring about an age of peace for Middle-earth. And of course, there are no perfect parallels for this, but it is absolutely worth noting and discussing all of this when it comes to Tolkien Reading Day and the question of why Tolkien chose this date. The Tolkien Road podcast discussed this on episode 51, and their podcasts are usually a lot more in-depth than mine. Their whole deal is it's a long walk through Middle-earth, so their podcasts are a lot longer and more conversational. So if you are interested in learning more about why Tolkien chose March 25th, I would definitely recommend checking out that episode. Now, this year's theme is hope and courage, two virtues which are dependent on one another, and two things that we dearly need in these days. It takes courage to hold on to hope in the face of darkness or apparent ruin, but it is also hope that can push us towards the most courageous of deeds. But in many cases, the characters of Tolkien's stories have been so burdened and crushed for long months and years by such a suffocating force of evil that they feel as if they are completely without hope. Weighed down by grief and yet not fully succumbed to despair, they trudge towards the light with their last ounce of strength and will, and it is in these circumstances that Tolkien's heroes are made. Now, this is very encouraging to me because I have very little strength of will, and this is something that we see over and over in Tolkien's works. To have courage when it would seem that all hope is gone forever. This is how Sam Gamgee is able to put one foot in front of another as he carried Frodo up the slopes of Doom. And this is how Aragorn and how Faramir were able to fight against the seemingly endless armies of Sauron. And this is how Gandalf was able to guide all of these moving pieces of men towards the final destruction of Sauron's realm. If I were to choose one character who most exemplified this idea, I think it would be Sam, one of the greatest heroes of The Lord of the Rings, in my opinion. Sam was given the task of staying with Frodo and helping him along his journey, though he didn't know exactly what it would cost him in the end. And as the seemingly endless miles of their journey wore on, Sam became weary, as anyone would. But his ability to hold on to courage despite having no hope of a return journey is incredibly inspiring to me. In The Return of the King, Tolkien wrote, "But the bitter truth came home to him at last. At best, their provision would take them to their goal, and when the task was done, there they would come to an end, alone, houseless, foodless, in the midst of a terrible desert. There would be no return." So that was the job I felt I had to do when I started, thought Sam, to help Mr. Frodo to the last step and then die with him? Well, if that is the job, then I must do it. But I would dearly like to see Bywater again, and Rosy Cotton, and her brothers, and the Gaffer, and Marigolds, and all. I can't think somehow that Gandalf would have sent Mr. Frodo on this errand if there hadn't have been any hope of his ever coming back at all. Things all went wrong when he went down in Moria. I wish he hadn't. He would have done something. But even as hope died in Sam, or seemed to die, it was turned to a new strength. Sam's plain hobbit face grew stern, almost grim, as the will hardened in him, and he felt through all his limbs a thrill, as if he was turning into some creature of stone and steel that neither despair nor weariness nor endless barren miles could subdue. We see this sort of courage in so many of Tolkien's characters as well, in every member of the Fellowship, even Boromir, I would argue. But someone who stood out to me outside of the Fellowship that I wanted to talk about today was Faramir. Faramir, captain of Gondor, brother to Boromir and son of Denethor, has been worn down by years of battle against the forces of Mordor. From his perspective, there is little to no chance of victory. In the Two Towers, Faramir says to Frodo, "What hope have we? It is long since we had any hope. The sword of Elendil, if it returns indeed, may rekindle it, but I do not think that it will do more than to put off the evil day, unless other help unlooked for also comes, from elves or men. For the enemy increases as we decrease. We are a failing people, a springless autumn." And yet, despite feeling this way, Faramir continued to fight. Bound by this sense of duty and the firm desire to do what was right, his heart instilled with the goodness that came from Gandalf's mentorship, he was able to carry on. Now I want to look at Faramir in contrast with his own father, Denethor. When we meet Denethor in The Lord of the Rings, he is a man who has long ago lost any hope. Gondor, his realm, has endured the brunt of Sauron's forces for so long, and he has become obsessed with the Palantir. Now the Palantiri were ancient seeing stones created by the Noldor, used to communicate between realms. They were not evil at their beginning, but they have since fallen under the control of Sauron. In Denethor's case, Sauron has been using the Palantir to manipulate Denethor, showing him glimpses of his power and basically holding his hand and walking him down into the pits of despair. By the time Gandalf arrives at Minas Tirith with Pippin, he has essentially accepted that there would be no way to defeat Sauron without wielding the ring against him, something that we all know would be impossible to do, but nevertheless Denethor is convinced. He has lost all hope entirely and has gone so far as to renounce courage as vanity. And Denethor holds so tightly onto this despair even through the last moments of his life. Tolkien writes, "Pride and despair," he cried, "didst thou think that the eyes of the White Tower were blind? Nay, I have seen more than thou knowest, grey fool, for thy hope is but ignorance. Go then and labor in healing. Go forth and fight, vanity. For a little space you may triumph on the field for a day, but against the power that now arises there is no victory." And then we see a very sad scene of Denethor ending his own life. Tolkien writes, "Then Denethor leapt upon the table, and standing there wreathed in fire and smoke, he took up the staff of his stewardship that lay at his feet and broke it on his knee. Casting the pieces into the blaze, he bowed and laid himself on the table, clasping the Palantir with both hands upon his breast. And it was said that ever after, if any man looked in that stone, unless he had great strength of will to turn it to other purpose, he saw only two aged hands withering in flame." So how can we avoid becoming like Denethor, despite all of the evil that surrounds us? This is a question that I wrestle with pretty often. How can we cling to courage despite a loss of hope? Every time I look at the news of the world around me, I see a worldwide pandemic, wars, genocide, racism, injustice, death, the dehumanization of the most vulnerable, and more and more and more until it reaches this point where it just feels like the entire world is evil and all is lost. But then this quote comes into my mind. The world is indeed full of peril, and in it there are many dark places, but still there is much that is fair. And though in all lands love is now mingled with grief, it grows perhaps the greater. And I think this is one of the great lessons that we can take away from Tolkien's works, that despite all evils in this world, there is still goodness, and we need only to look for it. And if we can manage to hold on to courage and grasp tightly the small moments of goodness or the small things that bring us joy, even when it would seem that all hope has left us, we may come through whatever shadow that has fallen upon us. In the Fellowship of the Ring, Frodo asks Gildor, "But where shall I find courage? That is what I chiefly need." And in typical elvish fashion, Gildor replies, "Courage is found in unlikely places." But there are so many moments throughout The Lord of the Rings in which characters are strengthened by small, unlooked-for moments which bring hope and courage. So many of my favorite Tolkien passages echo this idea, but none more than the moment in The Return of the King when Sam looks up to the sky from the desolation of Mordor. Tolkien writes, "There, peeping among the cloud rack, above a dark tor high up in the mountains, Sam saw a white star twinkle for a while. The beauty of it smote his heart as he looked up out of the forsaken land, and hope returned to him. For like a shaft, clear and cold, the thought pierced him that in the end the shadow was only a small and passing thing. There was light and high beauty forever beyond its reach." So I hope on this Tolkien reading day that you will be strengthened by these characters and that you will be able to hold on to whatever courage you can, and that you'll continue putting one foot in front of the other, even if everything around you feels dark. To paraphrase Gandalf, all we can do is decide what to do with our small measure of time and then trust to Providence that this will be enough. I want to end with this passage from letter 64 from the letters of J.R.R. Tolkien. Tolkien writes, "All we do know, and that to a large extent by direct experience, is that evil labors with a vast power and perpetual success in vain, preparing always only the soil for unexpected good to sprout in. So it is in general, and so it is in our own lives. But there is still some hope that things may be better for us, even on the temporal plane, in the mercy of God. And though we need all our natural human courage and guts, and all our religious faith to face the evil that may befall us, still we may pray and hope. I do." If this was your first time listening to the Tea with Tolkien podcast, I invite you to visit our website, teawithtolkien.com, to learn more about everything that we're doing over here. From our blog to our book club to our Discord and our shop, there's quite a lot going on over here and plenty of ways to get involved with the Tea with Tolkien community. We would love to have you. I hope you'll have a beautiful rest of the day. I hope you find a small way to celebrate Tolkien Reading Day. And if you do, I would love if you would tag me or send me whatever you're doing. If you post it on social media, I would be so excited to see it. And one last thing before I go, I wanted to mention that I am running a giveaway in honor of Tolkien Reading Day. It is going to be super awesome. It's on my website, teawithtolkien.com/podcast, and you will see it on this episode's show notes. I'm going to give away a copy of my Lord of the Rings devotional, To Middle-earth and Back Again, as well as our undated Tea with Tolkien planner, so you can start it at any time, and an illustrated edition of the Silmarillion. So the idea of this giveaway was that it would be a couple tools to help you get more immersed in the world of Tolkien and to help you along the way as you begin reading Tolkien. And the planner, honestly, is just a wonderful resource for organizing your daily life. So you can head over to my website, teawithtolkien.com/podcast, and you will find it there. And the giveaway runs through the end of the month. And I hope you enter because it's super exciting, and I hope you win. I will see you next week for week 12 of our Silmarillion book club.